How would you rank the possibilities for reversing the health care legislation? And there are four choices here.
Yeah.
Congress repealing it, the Supreme Court declaring the legislation unconstitutional, states declaring 10th Amendment privileges and refusing to participate, or other.
I think those later ones are harder. Number one, I don't know what the Supreme Court would do. I do believe the mandate is unconstitutional. I think there'll be, there are lots of attempts that we made on that, but there is severability, meaning you could knock out parts of the law and the rest of it will stay up. Here's what this law basically does. It makes the federal government as the single regulator of all health insurance. One person, the Secretary of HHS, is a woman named Kathleen Sebelius, just from the north up here, from Kansas. She is now going to be the regulator of all health insurance in America. She will determine what kind of health insurance you must buy or you must offer your employees. If you don't offer what they tell you you must offer your employees, you pay a penalty or you dump your employees in this new government-run exchange. Once this exchange is up and running, it is an open-ended entitlement. That means, basically, for people making less than $100,000, which is virtually all people in America, the government will say, if your health care expenses exceed anywhere from 2 to 9.8% of your income, don't worry about it. Uncle Sam's got you covered. The government will pick up the rest of the tab. That's what this law basically does. Now, it is built upon a fiscal house of cards. It is fiscally unsustainable. But the only way to contain costs under this kind of policy architecture is for the government, which there are 4 agencies in this law that do this, is to systematically and deeply ration health care. That is not something we want to give the government the power to do. The government should not be telling us, our physicians no doubt, whether we can or cannot have a procedure we and our physician thinks we ought to have. But that is where this legislation goes. That's the inevitable outcome of this kind of a bill. And because of that, I do believe that there can be built the popular support to repeal this thing. So the legal route is one that I just have a hard time predicting how that will go. But you will still have the architecture of this entitlement in place, and therefore the legislative route is really the only surefire, lasting, and comprehensive way to do it.
Our third question, what roles do you think tanks play in the formation of your policy ideas?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I want to just say, OCPA, I mean, every state needs a think tank like this. And I want to say, David Brown, thank you for your vision for doing this here in Oklahoma. For teaming up. And I remember you when you were the chairman of the Heritage Foundation in Washington. Everybody needs a David Brown in our state. Can we borrow this guy to bring him back to Wisconsin? I got to tell you, this is the intellectual firepower that we're going to need. Now, obviously, we have great grassroots activity happening. That's what the whole Tea Party movement's all about. It's a good movement. But we've got to be able to fight fire with fire. They have brought their best intellectual game. They're going to be arguing on behalf of this transformative, progressivist agenda, and we have to have the courage of our conviction and the intellectual rigor in order to which to confront this. Look, this is not the kind of election people enjoy having. It really is a realignment time. And I would simply argue this. We are right now a center-right nation. And so it is better for those of us who are center-right to move forward with having a real referendum. Do we want America to be the American idea? Do we want to advance American exceptionalism in the 21st century? Or are we willing to allow it to be transformed into this European cradle-to-grave welfare state society? That's really the essence of the question we're going to be asking or deciding at the next couple of elections. And in order to have that kind of decision made properly, in order to have the public fully understand the magnitude of the votes they're going to be casting in the ballot box in the next couple of elections, you've got to have intellectual rigor. You've got to have the think tanks. You've got to have people doing the research, going into the communities, and explaining the consequence of these ideas. Without state-based think tanks, without people like Ed Fulner and the Heritage Foundation doing this, we will lose. They have the universities. They have so many institutions on the left that help them. All we really have, from our perspective, are these think tanks. And so that is simply why I want to say I'm so happy that this room is full, so happy you're participating here. This is one of the best ways. Somebody just asked me over there in the room about an hour ago, well, I'm from a red state. I've got good Republican representatives. What can I do to help save my country? You can support think tanks like OCPA. You can support think tanks like Heritage Foundation. You can help export these good ideas into other states so that other people can be acquainted with them so that we can keep this great country going. That was a long answer, so.
How physically sound is the United States today, and what recommendations do you have to immediately improve our situation?
Well, I would argue let's cut spending. And that's pretty where I would start. Look at the budget the president just gave us a few weeks ago. At the end of the president's budget window, that's 2020, he's proposing that the interest on our debt be $914 billion. About $1 trillion just in interest payments on the debt. Now that's if we have low interest rates, which we know we won't at that time. And so taking a look at the fiscal, it looks like a hockey stick. If you look at the graph on a chart, it is literally a tidal wave of debt. We will have, as the largest government program, the interest on the debt. It will swallow really, literally everything else. And the point I simply make is, the sooner you act to confront the causes of our debt, which is namely our entitlement programs, runaway government spending, the sooner you can make a promise to those who are already on these programs they're not going to be affected if we reform them going forward. And so what we've shown with the roadmap plan I put out is it is not too late for America to literally turn this debt around and get it paid off completely. The debt goes to astronomical amounts, to 700% of our economy by mid-century. We literally fall off a cliff and our economy comes to a halt. When you ask the government to measure where our debt is headed right now, how far it's going, the computers that measure this literally crash in about 2058 because they say America is on such an unsustainable path that its economy will not continue. And so knowing this, as we all know, Republicans and Democrats know this, what I find mystifying is you don't have enough Tom Coburns out there who are saying, look at what's happening, let's act now to stop it. Problem we've had is demagoguery on entitlements. Demagoguery, which is if you put your head up above the foxhole in Washington and propose an idea to cut something, to reduce spending, they demagogue you, defeat you in the next election. You can't send people to Washington like that anymore. You have to send people to government who have the courage of actually looking at the facts and doing something about it. So specifically, what's happening is we know irrefutably, statistically, the next generation is going to have an inferior standard of living. That's not that's not a debatable point. And we also know that if we act soon, we can turn things around and, yes, do what this country does every prior generation, which is address the challenges so the next generation is better off, so people have higher living standards. And the reason we will not do that if we don't is because of our debt. China and Japan won't keep financing it. You literally can't go down the path of having the Federal Reserve print more money to try and monetize the debt, because that just gives us runaway inflation, wipes out the middle class. And so there's only really one way to do it. Control spending, cut spending, reform these entitlement programs. It's the only alternative, because you literally cannot tax your way out of this problem.
Congressman, our final question. Go ahead. Tonight we honor some great young people, and we're excited about their future. One revealing issue this past year has been the obvious confusion in some people's understanding of a constitutional republic. We saw this a bit in the debate down in Texas as they debated school books there. Do we need to re-examine the curriculum being taught in our public schools which deal with history, government, and civics?
I think the answer is definitely yes. I agree with that completely. If you actually look at a lot of the textbooks these days through public schools, there's a bit of revisionist history being practiced. Look, I'll just put it this way. If we don't know where we come from, if we don't know the idea of this country, if we don't understand the principles that built it, on which it was 20 million veterans fought and lost their lives for, over the centuries, then we cannot keep this thing going. What's so unique about this country, from my perspective, is it's just so rare. It's the most... It's the best way human beings have ever discovered to organize a society, built around the idea that our rights come before government. They come, as the words in the Declaration say, from nature and nature's God, not from government. It's very unique, it's very special, and it's something that is not being done around the world. And it is something that is under duress right now. It's something we could lose. And if we teach our children something other than that, if we teach them that that is not who we are, where we come from, why we fight for it, then we will not keep this going. It is not something that we can take for granted.